the limit?
Well, I seem to have a different variety, and I can handle the daily hate mails. You know, those are usual people that just don't understand you, don't understand who you are, what you're doing. But it goes beyond that when you cross boundaries, and you know, there's just a concerted attack against me all the time on the net. It always boils down to a certain group of people. And, you know, the Lord's just saying he's had enough now. He keeps a lot from me. I don't see a lot of what's happening. And he may present a lot more than I've ever seen. I'm sure he does.
That's very true. You know, everyone that does follow Jesus for real will be persecuted. And Jesus told us that throughout the gospel. He said, if they hated me, they will hate you. And if they persecuted me, they will persecute you. So really what Sherry was talking about earlier is exactly true. If you can't take the little bit of heat now for standing for Jesus and against the lies the churches teach, there's no way in the world you'll be able to stand against the heat when the Antichrist will come and take over this world.
Yeah, you know, the biggest thing that the Lord has shown me this week is that is the strength of your spirit, because people don't realize, and maybe they do, is that the closer you've come to him and you live for him daily, your spirit becomes a brick house. You know, you're solid. You're grown in him. You have his knowledge, his love in you. You're strengthened by his spirit daily. And when these attacks come, you just laugh, you know, and you know you have that faith in him and that relationship with him already, that you know he's going to protect you. You know without a doubt that you would die within any given second for him. So, you know, coming during the tribulation period, you've already been tested. You've already been tested daily.
But do you agree, Sherry, that right now, tonight, at this very moment, whoever's listening, God is calling us simply to walk with him and live for him?
Yeah.
But we will be persecuted. But today he's asking us to live for him. But one day in the future, the only thing left will be to die for him.
Right. It's going to come down to live or die for me.
Yes, it will. And we see this happening all around us. It's like there's a dark force slowly weaving a web around this world, and it's closing in. And most people are they're just lulled into a false security by the churches, and they're just totally unprepared.
Well, you know, persecutions have been rampant around this globe. We know that Stalin killed 40,000, perhaps even millions of Christians. China right now is persecuting Christians daily. Over 6,000 sitting in prisons that are being beaten and tortured and killed, and just for no other reason than going to church, going to Sunday school, holding prayer meetings in their homes, trying to buy a Bible. In Africa, the persecutions, the Islams and Muslims are wiping out Africa of Christians.
That's true, and it's something we hear very little about.
Yeah, and you know what? I've always heard that when it leaves Africa, it will be in America. So there's your timetable, folks. Because these persecutions have been going around the world for ages, and the American media doesn't report it.
No, they don't. And you know, when it happened with 9/11, up to that day, Christians in America, and American in general, they thought they were immune to attacks, persecution, and everything. And when those planes smashed into the World Trade Center, I think America got a wake-up call.
Well, I hope they got the right kind of wake-up call, because, you know, basically there were so many different things working on that day. I mean, I think if we had a history to look back on, because it's not going to be much longer where we do.
That's true.
It'll be the beginning of the end. That right there is basically the beginning of our end. We're going to have about, you know, several more years to go, and it's going to get worse and worse and worse every year. We're not going back to Kansas, folks. We've passed that threshold. We're never going back to apple pie baseball, no worries. I mean, America has changed. People can feel it, but then they keep waiting to go back. Go back to their couches, be the potatoes they were before, and I have to worry about this kind of stuff. But you better be on your guard, because it's never going to happen again.
Well, you're absolutely right, Sherry. In fact, with this recent election, when George Bush won and he supposedly stands for Christian values, I got some email from Christians that they actually believe that we are going to go back to a time of a golden age of Christian morality, and the people that are immoral are going to slink back into the closets, and America is going to, you know, reign in this great righteous age, and all these evil television shows are going off. And I think these people are living in a bubble.
Yeah, that's churchdom for you. And let me tell you about an email I got this week, and tell the listeners, this week I heard from India, Austria, Greece, and Belgium. And an older woman from Belgium sent me an email and said a friend had given her a CD of one of my taped shows. Somebody had taped my shows on CDs and was passing them out.
Right.
And so she was contacting me from finding me off this CD she'd gotten. And her first question was, what kind of Christian are you? And then from Belgium gave me her view of what a Christian was looking at America today. And she didn't do this in any kind of agenda-wise. She was just an older woman resident from Belgium giving what she sees. And it just floored me because her view of Christianity was one that our government has given the world, and that we're bloodsuckers, we're vicious, we're rapists, we're murderers, we're bullies. And I said, listen, ma'am, let me tell you about the God I serve. You know, and I told her about the Lord, and I told her, listen, these are not Christians in our government. These are Satanists who call themselves Christians. They're doing all of these atrocities in the name of religion, just as Hitler did, just as every revolution has in the past. They used the Catholic Church back then. Every revolution, every war was built for no other reason than to build the Vatican's coffers.
Just like
to make
the
them rich.
Crusades. That was done in the name of God.
It was done in the name of God, and that's exactly what these Satanists are doing now in America. They're doing everything and putting God out there, and these people don't know the Most High God. The God they follow is not the Most High God. They worship Lucifer.
Well, that is true. Even the head of the UN now is the spiritual advisor of the UN is a woman named Alice Bailey, who's one of the premier satanic writers in this country.
Oh, she certainly is. And so, you know, as I sent this email to this lady, she wrote back and she goes, she said, he replied some way that I've never met a real Christian. I'm glad to have met you.
Well, what does she think of Christianity in America? Or what does she describe Christianity like in her country?
Well, I'm not sure. Well, you know, religion is dead in Europe. I mean, we've heard it for years.
Right.
It's basically the churches are turning into mosques now, Islam thing, you know.
So what, does she meet in a home with a few other Christians?
I'm not sure. She just said, I've never met a real Christian until I've talked to you. So I'm not real sure what I know what she thought it was. And I explained to her what a real Christian is and how we build a relationship with the Lord and we seek Him daily. You know, and not this, you know, blood-drinking Satan crap, bullying, murdering crap that you see from our government. You know, it's a big difference of just walking the walk and talking the talk, just to lull people to sleep.
Well, that's very true. You know, I do say, I wrote this many times on my site. By the way, it's www.satansrapture.com. Anybody wants to check it out. I've always said that the first churches started in homes, and the last churches will start in homes.
Yeah, they're going back home.
Right. The only way you'll find the truth is you have a few people gathered together and pray in Jesus' name and ask God to seek you without some religious leader in the pulpit standing there trying to take your money and dictate your life.
Almost every church in America today is an abomination to the Lord.
Well, I agree with that.
Almost every single church. And you ask your pastor, are you 501c3? And if he says yes, he is an abomination to the Lord.
What exactly is that?
501c3 replaced the Lord as the head of the church and made Caesar the head. It gave the state the headship of the church. So if you go to church and you're getting a tax form at the end of the year, I don't know if it's a W-2 or 1099 or whatever it is,
right?
Then you're in a state-sponsored church and not a Lord head church.
Do you think the government has any control over what the churches teach us, or?
According to Tex Mars, they do. Tex Mars had a book out about 501c3 churches.
Right.
And he came out with this right when the whole tax issue started about churches getting tax-exempt status. And he went through the IRS materials, and he poured through it, and he wrote down everything, the thou shalt and thou shalt nots from these churches the IRS was going to demand. And now some of these pastors that have already done this 501c3 never really knew what they were doing. They just said, oh, we can get tax-exempt status, and they went for it without investigating anything of what they were doing.
Well, that's the usual history of the church.
And what they did, for their ignorance, was that there's a whole slew of thou shalt nots that the church says that state says the church can't talk about. They could not endorse a political candidate. You cannot talk about hell and sin, which is why a lot of these churches today, I get donations on websites just because I speak of sin and hell, abominations.
Right.
Because they won't do that in churches today. They're not allowed.
Well, I know there's a lot of even legislature now to want to dictate what is sin and what isn't. Like,
well, it's hate speech.
Hate speech. If you speak against, it's kind of ridiculous. I think there's a hate speech legislation. If you say that homosexuality is a sin, they say it's hate. But if you say drunkenness is sin, that's not hate.
Well, if you say, you're not allowed to talk about sin anymore. So you know what it is? It's I don't know if they're going to let them say bad energy or negative energy, or I don't know how they're going to do it. Yeah, you know, that's just too new age for me. But, I mean, I know what it is.
But also, if